Hi, my name is Ruth Axton, and I'm a whole being athlete ambassador for Athletes for Hope. And today, Alice and I are going to be talking about mental health and eating disorders. A little bit about myself. I am a coxswain on the Georgetown women's rowing team. We have our Patriot League championships. When this posted, they'll be done. So hopefully we won. And I'm a graduating senior at Georgetown. So really excited to talk about eating disorders and mental health today.
Thank you, Ruth. I am Alice Merryweather. I am a member of the U.S. Alpine Ski Team. I'm a 2018 Olympian, and I'm also a student at Dartmouth College right now, currently in my junior year. And I'm also a whole being athlete ambassador, and I'm really excited to get this conversation going. A little bit about my story and why I'm so passionate about mental health and eating disorders, because 2020 affected all of us in some pretty intense emotional ways. And for me, the stress that I felt from the pandemic and just all of the uncertainty that was going on, especially at the very beginning of COVID, it manifested in anorexia and in a restrictive eating disorder. And so I ended up getting diagnosed not until the fall of 2020. I went to treatment that November and ended up taking that entire following ski season off instead of competing, just to focus on finding joy in life again and getting back on my feet. And kind of since then, since going through that and since learning from a lot of other athletes helped me get through that time, speaking about it has become really important to me.
Yeah. I think the pandemic definitely affected all of us. And I think it's been interesting for me, for my own personal mental health story. I think I faced a lot of isolation during the pandemic, as everybody did, being away from my friends, being away from my teammates. I didn't return back to rowing full steam until the fall of this year. So it was a lot of time apart. I left as a sophomore, came back senior year, and was like, whoa, okay. And so I think that it's been really interesting, to try to understand how the pandemic affected people differently and how, some of my friends faced the pandemic completely differently. So I think that has been something to I've had to really take account of in coming back to real life and saying okay, did you just how did it affect people? It's been really interesting. And I think with eating disorders, I personally have a lot of my friends growing up suffered from eating disorders. And I think that a lot of them being athletes, there were a lot of blocks that they faced, just trying to get the ball rolling in terms of treatment. And I think that's been a pattern that I've seen going into college as well, and saying all right, something's not right here. I'm still able to athletically perform sometimes, but something is off here. And I think that was something that was really eye-opening to me also during the pandemic, when being isolated. I don't know if you experienced that in your journey, but it was something that I really noticed.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head with how isolating it was. And I think in my case, feeling a little bit less supported by my team and by my coaches, and feeling like I had to manage my own workout plan and my whole preseason plan by myself. It was more than I was able to undertake at that time. And so, I thought at that point, when I was really getting kind of taken over by my eating disorder, I got very confused in what I thought was good for my athletic career. I thought I was eating clean, all of those kind of buzzwords that society tells you that, certain foods are good, certain foods are bad. And I had no one to kind of keep me on track and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't good. It seemed like being so separate from my team, and each of us kind of going through that in our own ways of having to navigate a prep period and an off season on our own. It made it really confusing. And then coming back together also, just I don't know, I felt like it was very weird to suddenly navigate social situations again. We didn't see people for months and months. And suddenly seeing people was way more stressful. And it's definitely been a back and forth adjustment, and especially with school too, going from in-person to remote back to in-person. And it's got kind of different formatting, and it all feels like a new world again.
Yeah. I think something that like you mentioned that is trying to deal with it yourself. And it's something that I've looked into a lot in like my senior research and is like trying as an athlete, we always try to like tough it out and just, make it work because we know how to be strong in the weight room. We know how to be strong in the boat. Like that's something that comes naturally to us, but it's like the idea of having to like, I'll just figure it out. I'll bear down, I'll run through the wall, I'll figure it out. And I think that has also led to so much of just not feeling comfortable to talk about it. And it's a phrase that I feel like sometimes gets like, it's become very much like a buzz phrase of normalizing the conversation, but it's so necessary. And because we end up in these situations where I'm going to run through this wall. I'm going to try my best to run through the wall. And this isn't Harry Potter and the wall just doesn't suddenly open up. This isn't going to work. But you feel like you're stuck in this corner where it's like, I can't tell anybody about this because I have to try to just figure it out like I always have. And I think that, I mean, you've seen both ends of this coin in terms of being a professional athlete and being a college athlete. I think being a college athlete requires so much of like personal management, from school to not being a hermit to, performing athletically. It's so much of a balance that I constantly find myself and like a lot of other people are thinking like, all right, like I just got to figure it out. I got to figure it out. And it's because of like that stigma of saying, hey, I need help. It's so pervasive. And I think the buzz phrase of normalizing the conversation is so apt and it's so necessary.
Yeah, I agree. Like it cannot be said too much to normalize having these conversations, and especially, as athletes, I love the running into the wall, because I think that's what we're taught. And that's kind of how most athletes are hardwired, is a lot of us have some perfectionist traits, and we're used to putting our all into our sports. And oftentimes that carries over into school and into being really good friends. And we just want to do everything at our full capacity all the time. And that's exhausting. And it does turn you away from asking for help, because suddenly you feel like, that's not true to who you are as the person who can do everything. And the conversation within athletics, I feel like, is always just, tough it out, do one more rep, do one more set. And in terms of mental health, that means just, well, if you don't feel great, tough it out, you'll figure it out. And that really needs to change. And it is changing, which is cool. I think that finally people are having these conversations a little bit more, not to say that we are anywhere near where we need to be, but I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to talk today on this, and that I have heard, even just around campus this spring, I've heard more people on different teams talking about how they've had meetings with their teams to talk about mental health, and to see that different institutions are starting to prioritize mental health a little bit more. It feels like progress, but it shouldn't have required a pandemic to kind of get the ball rolling on this, I think.
I totally agree. At Georgetown, I think the conversation has definitely started. We were lucky enough to have the Helinskis from Helinski's Hope come and talk to us on campus this year. We sort of had like a whole mental health week leading up to it, which was good. We got all teams to sort of start talking about it. And then my roommate and I started this mental health alliance on campus, which has been a really awesome addition of just getting athletes from different teams. And frankly, if I had looked at the Georgetown student athlete population, I would not have told you the teams that I have participating in this, because, I wasn't friends with them, or the friendships that I had with them didn't lead me to have these conversations with them. But it's been really nice to like see it come across all different aspects of the department. So that's been really cool. And the other thing that you mentioned in talking about it, and that stigma there, is I think it was mentioned in the A Letter to College Athletics, the piece that went up on Morgan's Message by the Vanderbilt lacrosse player. Awesome piece. If you're watching this and you haven't read it, I want you to pause it, go read it, and then come back. But she talked a lot about how taking time off is so stigmatized. And I think that's another thing that like gets into, you know, the barriers to actually getting help for what's going on. And because the idea of going up to your coach and saying, I need a month, I need more than a month, I need time, I need a semester, is just for so long has been an impossible thing to even imagine and expect to come back and be treated as a serious athlete, because it just puts like a label on of somebody who's maybe not dedicated or maybe isn't cut out for college athletics or professional athletics. Like it's that the whole taking time off thing, especially now that the way that sports have changed and people are specializing so much younger and people are starting sports so much younger. From what I've heard about skiing, I've been skiing twice in my life. I'm pretty incredible at it. But I've heard that people like, it's a sport that you start so young that, you know, once you're going and going since you've been 5 years old and now you're 22, and it's an incredible amount of time to expect somebody to do one thing and never have to be like, I need a breather. And so I think that's another thing that really I hope to change in the future, is the idea of being like, maybe we shouldn't do 20 hours for 50 weeks of the year. Maybe.
Yeah. I adore that idea. And I think burnout is a serious problem. I mean, you're not wrong that with skiing, kids specialize really young. And that's a huge reason that from, I think, the age of like 14 to 18, I think maybe 1 in 10 kids stays in the sport of ski racing, because it's just so intense and you have to specialize so early if, you know, you want to make it, or so people will say. That, yeah, it is really unsustainable for a lot of people. And the ones that do get through often are told like, oh, okay, like, you know, you've suffered through it. Just keep putting your head down and keep pushing through. And that's an extremely unhealthy way of looking at it. I think that in so many sports, if we allowed for more flexibility, and even if coaches could open up the conversation a little bit more, where we start normalizing rest, and you're right, being able to ask for a week, a month, a semester off, and saying, you know what, yes, I want you to be the best person you can be and the best athlete that you can be. And if this time off is going to allow you to do that, then I'm all for it. I think that conversation and the realization that rest and recovery are not laziness.
Yes.
Because I think that's really how it often gets misconstrued. And there's just this like innate belief that resting or taking time off is being lazy. And that is just not the case.
Yeah. And it's the same way that you would have a rest day in a week. I got a whole year, and I can't make up one Sunday isn't cutting it for me.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think thinking about eating disorders specifically, and, you know, how that has changed, I think just throughout my 8 years from high school to college, it's changed a lot. I mean, it's gone from being known as very stigmatized as, you know, a girl's problem, and, you know, girls just want to be small and they want to all that sort of jazz. And I think it's changed a lot, but I still think there are resources needed within college situations that, like, we're lucky enough at Georgetown to have a nutritionist on our staff that's able to help, and a source that people are able to go to talk about what's going on. And the counseling staff is obviously there, but I think that sometimes people forget they're there, or, you know, there's also that opportunity of, I talked with, forget who it was, but just about having, you know, counseling staff that's athletes that also are struggling with mental health, and then people that are struggling with performance anxiety, and how those are two separate things, in the same way that having a nutritionist on staff that is, you know, there to help the kid on the O line get to the weight he needs to be, and then have a more, you know, emotional and in-depth conversation. I sometimes feel like those can be two separate jobs. Well, we're lucky enough to have a nutritionist right now that can do both hats. I think that is somewhere in the future that I'd like to see more resources for.
I agree. Having just a wider range of resources available so that one mental health staff member doesn't have to wear all the hats.
Yeah.
Or one dietitian doesn't also have to be emotional support and the nutritionist and help eating disorder patients. And we should have specialized care for all of these areas, because that would be so valuable to so many teams. I also think that starting education a little bit younger with like high school sports and maybe even middle school age kids, just about mental health and athletics, and realizing that, you know, getting outside and playing, yeah, it's really good for you, but also, you know, there's baggage that comes with that, and there's stress and there's anxiety, and I never learned about those things when I was a kid. You know, I had one day in health class in 6th grade where they, you know, said, well, anorexias and eating disorders in general are things that teenage girls do to themselves. And, you know, it's because they all want to be skinny. And that was what I learned. You know, there was never any conversation about it on sports teams during my youth. And I wish that I had that education, because then I could have known to be on the lookout a bit more. I probably would have felt more comfortable telling someone that I was struggling much sooner. And it circles back to having these conversations, but also trying to, you know, have coaches and have mental health staff available to younger teams where we can get this information out to a younger age group and start the conversations earlier. I think that would be a really important preventative move for a lot of athletes that could really pay off in their future.
Yeah. The preventative thing is huge. And I think that played into a lot of, you know, my experiences in high school contrasted to my experiences in college. And a few years ago, I was able to go back and talk with some of the high school teams, like in the area that I grew up in, and talk about eating disorders, because I think so much of, you know, you're young, you're 14 to 18 years old, and there's a lot of things being thrown at you from all angles, whether that's like best intentioned information, whether that's like what we're synthesizing from social media, whether that's what we're hearing from celebrities. You're dealing with 45 other things, and you're also trying to figure out who you are all at once. And I think that sometimes it can definitely get lost in that age group. So I think that's huge. And not having your athletic trainer wear that hat when you're in high school, because I went to a public high school, and we had 2 athletic trainers, which was awesome. But, you know, they took on a lot. I'm not asking my athletic trainer to perform surgery on me. There's 2 separate people there for a reason. Why aren't there 2 separate people there for one for, you know, the fact that I sprained my ankle, and the other one for, you know, mental health purposes? So I think it needs to go all the way down. Totally agree.
Yeah. I also think your mention of social media is huge. I mean, there is just so much information out there, and some of it is great and positive and helpful, and some of it is extremely harmful and negative. And I know that I've fallen victim to, you know, the health information that you see on Instagram or TikTok, and, you know, telling you what's good food and what's bad food, or what an athlete should be doing, or even just seeing some of my teammates and competitors and seeing what they're doing in their off season. The ability to compare what I'm doing to what everyone else in my sport is doing can be really great, because then I know if I'm on the right track, but also then it makes you feel like if you're not doing the same thing or more, that you're not doing enough. Right. And I think that conversation needs to be had of the dangers of comparison that happen from social media, and also just the lack of actual vetted good information on social media about nutrition and bodies. And, you know, the word health gets thrown around way too much on social media, in my opinion.
I also think that harkens back to our conversation earlier about the pandemic. I felt like that was when the rise of TikTok in spring of 2020 was possibly the worst combination known to man. And I think the app is so interesting. I spend far too much time on it, but there's so much on that app that like trends that really twist in health information too, like what I eat in a day. I don't need to see what people are eating in a day because I'm my own human and I have my own needs. And I think that, again, back into even like what we were talking about younger kids, you and I are now older, a little bit wiser. But if I was 15, it could have been, and it wasn't great when I was 21, but if I was 15 or 16, it's now being started so much earlier that I think it's so important to just like, I don't understand why those things are on there and I don't know how to get them off, but I think trying to start information more concretely younger would hopefully help to counteract that.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like just, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I feel like going to middle school, like in a social media free environment. I mean, Instagram was just becoming a thing when I was in middle school. And
I was doing this in my pictures. Like I was
crazy. And so like, I truly don't even know what kind of conversations are happening, but the fact that there are all of those, what I eat in a day, or, before and after pics of, going on a diet, or the fact that diet culture is still so pervasive. I think that, I guess I'm hopeful that, in a younger age group and in an early social media exposed age group, that there is a conversation about the fact that not everything on there is true, and that every single body is different. What I eat in a day, I was during the pandemic when we were all alone a lot. So I spent a lot of time on Instagram and TikTok, and I got wrapped into like listening to the stuff that I was seeing on there in those videos, and felt like I needed to be doing the same kind of things or listening to those people. And it's really easy to do that. I think that, I don't know how to, how to address that content. It is such a massive problem. Yeah. But I just want to tell everyone that is seeing that kind of content and believing it and say, wait a minute, no, you are your own person. Eat what feels right. Do what feels right for your body. Listen to yourself. Yeah. I wish I could tell myself that 2 years ago.
Yes. I feel like also trying to find a solution to this is so hard. My friend always says when I come with a problem or something, I'll get halfway through the story and she'll be like, stop, are you solutions oriented right now? Or do you just want to tell me about this problem? And I'm like, I don't think I can be solutions oriented right now. Yeah. It's so, because it's such, and obviously we've talked about the ways that like things could be better and things can be better, but it's such a daunting problem to try to imagine to fix. I mean, definitely. I think that also feeds into like, if I had a microphone that spread out to every young athlete in the world, like what would I say to them? And that's the main thing, is that you are your own person and you listen to your own body and don't try to compare it to other people's. So I don't know when that mic's coming in. Maybe I'll get it off Amazon or something someday, but
I feel like, that'll probably happen at some point, that you'll be able to get access to a microphone like that.
Yeah.
I hope that day comes. I would listen to your microphone.
You would. One listener. Yeah, I think that like, I don't know. I try to think about what I would try to direct people to if they were struggling. And I think like starting with being open about your feelings with your teammates, those close to you, those feel like you can trust. And then, identifying those resources like around you. For example, we have on our campus a few different options for like who to reach out to in terms of a helpline that's 24/7 or things like that. And they're also national stuff. And I think that those sometimes get lost. And when I was working this semester on trying to, get the word out about the Mental Health Alliance and all that fun stuff, it was a lot of like, I myself was like, I didn't know we had this. Nobody ever talks about this unless it's, you know, one of 1,000 emails that I get from the university a day in my inbox. And so I think that, like, trying to, if you are trying to be a mental health advocate within your space, you know, making sure those resources are known to those around you too. And so if somebody comes to you with a problem, being like, did you even know we had this? Not trying to pawn them off, but I feel like it doesn't hurt to hear it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think also what you said about just, if you are struggling, telling someone close to you, telling someone that you trust, just having that one initial conversation and getting the ball rolling can lead to getting help. And it's extremely scary and extremely stressful. And honestly, like, when I first had that conversation, I felt embarrassed and I felt ashamed that I was struggling because of all of those societal norms that I felt as an athlete, that it's not okay to feel like that.
Yeah.
And as terrifying as it is, just telling someone, whether it's a family member, a best friend, a teammate, taking that first step is so important. And I would encourage anyone that's listening that is struggling to move forward and tell that one person, because they can help you then find resources that will be valuable to you, or they can at least be a sounding board for how you might want to take another step to get towards treatment. But even just voicing that you are struggling is a really relieving feeling. And I hope that anyone listening can do that, because it will get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, totally agree. There's helplines. There's the National Eating Disorder Helpline that is open 9 to 9, Monday to Thursday, 9 to 5 on Fridays. It's open and it's there, and reach out.
They're great websites too, like NADA website. I know is a great resource that I've used even for family members or for people in your life to better figure out how they can help you. It shouldn't just be on you to teach everyone how to help you. Thankfully, there's a lot of really great resources for the people close to you. Or if you think you know someone that's struggling who hasn't told you, you can also find a lot of great information on the NIDA website, and those hotlines, I think, have some of that as well.
Yeah.
What would you want to tell? Well, you already had your microphone moment. Is there anything else that you feel struggling athletes could really benefit from hearing?
I think a lot when I like this question, because I've posed this question myself before. And I think a lot about, like, what would I tell little Ruth? And, like, what would I tell younger Ruth who makes her dad leave for soccer practice 2 miles away 3 hours early because she thinks something's terrible is going to happen and she's not going to make it? And I think that a lot of the times when we're struggling with something, it makes us, we get into this zone of, I am the only one in the world that's dealing with this, or I'm the only one in the world that can't seem to get past this. And it's very isolating, just like the pandemic was, but you're isolated. You've created the isolation within your own head. And so I think that understanding you're not alone. And again, just like normalizing the conversation, like I said earlier, it's become a buzz phrase, but it is so true, is that you are not the only one. If you think you are, I can guarantee you you're not. And I'll take that to the grave. You are not alone in struggling with it. And so I think that's something that's just like really huge to hear. Because it's so often we convince ourselves that, you know, everybody else has got it figured out. It's just me. I just can't do it. I can't do it. And so I think that that's the biggest thing. What would you say with your world microphone?
Oh my goodness. I mean, first I would probably angle my microphone towards yours because I want to repeat everything you just said. I laugh because it's so true, because when you're struggling, it does feel like you're the only one doing it and that everyone else has all the answers. And that's just not the case. You are never alone. And I would just really want to encourage anyone and everyone to reach out, to have those conversations, to tell someone you're struggling, to ask for help, no matter how scary it is, because ultimately that is going to get you headed in the direction towards recovery and towards living a much happier and more fulfilling life. I think that yeah, there's honestly, it all boils back down to having the conversations.
Yeah, I
So
totally agree. So if you had to look back and, when Suzanne emailed you or when you started getting involved in being an advocate, what was like your motivation? What really inspired you to do it?
I felt really inspired, honestly, because when I was struggling the most with my eating disorder and when I went to treatment and was feeling very alone, I relied on other athletes who had been through something similar to help lift me up. And I heard so many stories from other athletes and even from friends of mine that I just didn't know that they had gone through something like that. And it was that kind of camaraderie through the darkness that really helped get me through. And so I wanted to get involved with Athletes for Hope and being a whole being athlete because it made sense to me. I want to be able to do that for other athletes and help people feel less isolated. What about you, Ruth?
I echo again. I'm tilting my world microphone to you. I echo everything you're saying, and that, like, there is, I think I've seen it in my team this year. I think we've really had a turn of just being a lot more vulnerable with each other, and it's made our team the closest it's ever been. I've been on this team for 4 years, and there's truly never been a culture like there currently is. And it's like I could turn to any one of those girls and be like, not today. It's not happening. And they're right by my side. And I know because we've been able to talk about it, and I've been able to, find solace in the fact that, again, I'm not alone, and I'm not the only one that struggles when my alarm goes off at 5:07, that I'm not the only one that's like, I cannot do this. I can't do it. And I think that I also, in joining and becoming a whole being athlete ambassador, I wanted to reach more people, and I wanted to make sure that, my team at Georgetown, my 40 girls, were not the only ones feeling like we could have these conversations. I want it to go across Georgetown, and I want it to be a worldwide thing in athletics. I don't, you know what I mean? I think that was really what inspired me to take the next step in being a mental health advocate, is really like talking about it to the group that we're talking to today, just talking more about it. And so if some person from, the University of Iowa on the soccer team, who's somebody I would never have contact with, is watching this, but they think, hey, we can do that within our team, I think that makes the world of the difference.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're doing amazing work, and people are going to benefit from hearing you today. So
you too.
Thank you.
Tap the world microphones together.
Oh yeah. Cheers.
Well, thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, thank you. This has been delightful.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.